Alright, so what you're looking at in there is the gimbal bearing. That's where your input shaft or drive shaft goes through the boat from your outdrive through that gimbal bearing, rides in that gimbal bearing, and then enters into the back of the engine through the engine coupler. Gimbal bearings will generally last a lifetime as long as they don't get wet. That's where the problem comes in, is when they get wet due to possibly somebody forgot to put this gasket that rides in this little shoulder in here. Water will get in that way, but most commonly your U-joint bellows, which is the rubber accordion looking thing in there, that's your U-joint bellows. That is made of rubber. It will crack, or there's a spring in there that can poke a hole through it, and that's what lets water in and will damage your gimbal bearing. Otherwise, they last a lifetime. So while we got the drive off, we're going to wipe out any excess grease in there. Some people, when they grease their gimbal bearing, they go hog wild with grease. It's really not necessary. A couple, 2-3 pumps a year is generally plenty. Otherwise, it gets so caked up with oil or grease in there, it makes a complete mess. Sometimes that can damage the rubber U-joint bellows as well. So we're just gonna wipe out any excess in there and put a couple of pumps into it. So how you grease your gimbal bearing is on the starboard side, the right side of your transom bracket, there's a grease fitting. So there it is. We'll pump a couple of squirts in there, maybe until we see it come out of it a little bit. Okay, we see it coming out. I might even give it a little turn. A lot of times I'll do this with the engine running. That way the gimbal bearing is turning while you're pumping it in. Alright, so there's a couple of squirts of grease. That's how you grease your gimbal bearing. You do not need to do it while the drive is off, but it's a good time to do it. Either that or when the drive is on, normally before you put it in the water for the year, or when you take it out for the year and it's running. Just pump a few squirts in there if you can. It doesn't need to be running. But that's how you grease your gimbal bearing.